Well, hi everyone, Corey Barker here. Welcome back once again to Master Effects Training. Now, I wanted to throw in another little project this week. If you check out the cable project, I hope you enjoyed that. But I wanted to throw in this one because this is one of those things that kind of spun off when I was experimenting with the cable, 3D cable effect. Kind of got me an idea about thinking about abstract design elements. And this is, of course, inspired by something I saw online as well. I was sifting around Pinterest. If you haven't looked around Pinterest, as a designer, it is a world of ideas in there. So you can definitely get some really inspirational stuff just by looking around there. So combined with that and playing around with the cable effect, came out with this really interesting design effect that takes no time at all to create. So you're going to go into Photoshop and go to File, New, and create a new document. I'm going to make this a square document, 1000 by 1000 pixels with a black background. So go ahead and click Create. Now, go ahead, if your rulers are not visible, go ahead and turn them on by pressing Command or Control R. And then we're going to drag out a couple of guides here to establish the center of the canvas. So go into the vertical ruler here and just drag out a guide, and it will snap to the center of the document here. Let's go ahead and drag this one down as well and put it right there. There we go. So now we know exactly where the dead center of our canvas is. Go here into the toolbar and grab, or into the shape tools rather, and select the ellipse shape tool. And we're going to go ahead and make sure it creates a shape layer. So go ahead and make sure you have shape selected up here in the options bar. And then we're also going to set the fill to white. Since our background is black, let's go ahead and make it white so that we can see it when we create the shape. And go ahead and leave the stroke to none. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw out a shape, and there we have that. So now let's do combine. I'm actually going to draw out a circle here right toward the center here, and there we go. So what I want to do is create a cluster of shapes in here just by drawing and adding. And be sure not to draw perfect circles every single time. Just get some oval shapes in there and make them vertical and horizontal ovals. You don't want to go too crazy with the number of shapes that you add in here. So I'm just going to add a couple more here, maybe one more out here like this. Got a couple of little really small ones in there. I'm actually going to undo a few of these. So it's okay to have some small ones, but you want to have some pretty big ones in there so that you can really see the effect as it starts to take shape here. I want to be too picky with that. All right, so got a little cluster of shapes right here clustered around the center of the canvas. But I'm also going to go down here and add a couple right near the bottom corner of the document here. I'm actually make one of these more horizontal and maybe a little tiny one like that. So that's all I'm going to have. It's got a cluster of shapes right here in the middle and a few right here in the extreme lower right corner of the canvas area. Now notice again in the layers panel, these are all on one single shape layer. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and convert this to 3D. So very simply, you're going to go to the 3D menu, new 3D extrusion from selected layer. That's going to go and extrude the shape. Now again, let's go ahead and grab current view and rotate our canvas so we can see the extruded elements there. I'm going to go ahead and get my properties panel here. Let's again pull out 3D and properties. Let's take the extrusion depth all the way to the maximum amount and push it all the way through there. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and back to my default camera. And what I want to do is actually rotate this so that it's kind of standing upright on the ground plane. So you're going to select the ellipse shape 1 or ellipse 1 here. And in the properties panel, you're going to go to the very last tab at the top here, which is the coordinates tab. And we're going to go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees. If you remember in the cable project, we did the same thing. We're just going to go ahead into the X angle here and set this to 90. And that's going to shift the rotation there. Now I'm going to go into the 3D panel and make sure this is sitting on the ground plane. So go ahead and move object to ground plane here. And then we'll just adjust our camera view here. And even zoom out just a little bit here. Now I do want to go ahead, and even though we can't see it, I know it's there. Go ahead and turn off that ground plane shadow. Again, if you go into the environment property, and then go to the properties panel, go to the ground plane settings here, and let's dial that down to 0. Now we're going to go back to that shape and select the ellipse 1 shape in the 3D panel here. Get my properties panel right next to it. And up in the tabs up here in the properties panel, you're going to go to the second tab, which is where you find the deform features. And remember, we did this same thing. We did the twist feature right here. Now I'm going to actually go in here and make sure I've got my extrusion depth all the way set. Now I'm going to start dialing up the twist on the object here, and you're going to start to see it twist and give us a very interesting effect. Now, how much of a twist you apply is certainly up to you, but I'm just going to keep mine at around 650 to 700, I think, like that. Pretty good. Now, here's another thing to think about. It is actually rotating or twisting this object based on the center point between those two clusters of shapes. But if you go in here to the deformation axis and actually redirect or reestablish the center point, basically, you see I clicked on the left side center mark here. That ultimately changed the shape of that twist. It's a little bit more abstract here and a little less uniform, and thus giving it a much more interesting look there. So that is pretty much the base shape already created. Now I'm going to create a new document, and we're going to build the final design in this. So I'm going to go with the horizontal format here. I'm going to make this 2,000 pixels wide and 1,000 pixels tall. I'm going to go ahead and leave the background at black, and there we go. So now I've got this horizontal formatted document. And let's go ahead and bring our abstract element into this particular file. Now, again, as I've done in the past, when you are dragging and dropping 3D layers or 3D objects between Photoshop documents, you want to grab the layer itself in the layers panel and then drag it to the target document. Now I'm just going to hold down the shift key and just grab the layer itself, drag it over here, and it's going to go ahead and land centered in the image there. So go ahead and minimize this image. So there is my 3D element now in this document. Now I'm going to make some adjustments here on getting in its final placement. So I'm going to first go to current view, and I'm going to adjust the camera settings here. You'll notice by default for this particular document, it is a 31mm lens right here. I want to get a little bit wider view in that because I'm going to be moving in closer to this abstract element. I want a wider lens to look at it. So I'm actually going to drop this down to 15. Looks like it pushes it back in space, but we're actually, we've essentially changed the camera lens. So again, with current view selected, and I'm going to use the slide tool, as you can see right here in the options bar, the slide camera tool. Click and drag down, and that's going to bring the object now closer to us. Now you can see because of the wider angle lens, we're getting a much more dramatic angle on that particular object there. So we're getting this more of the this one outer wave, and you can see this outer streak element or outer extruded element. Those are those elements that were actually in that lower corner of our original document, and that's why they're spaced apart from the other elements here. And I'm actually going to use my widget and just rotate this object a little bit. And let's see what we've got here. So you can see if you zoom out your document, you can actually rotate this element around. There we go. So I'm going to get my little bit of extrusion there. There we go. So I'm just using my widget to kind of rotate it around. Of course, you can make these adjustments over and over again. You don't need to try and find something that works and then stick with it. You can, of course, make adjustments after the fact. I'm just trying to get a good positioning on it right off the bat here. Let's bring that a little bit closer. Maybe adjust this angle a little bit. A little bit something like that. There we go. So of course I can make some more adjustments to the angle, but let's move on to coloring the object. Now of course we are looking at the extrusion of the shapes we created. So that is what we need to adjust here. So again, in that 3D panel, we're going to go into the ellipse one shape. Now go and select the extrusion material right here. And in the properties panel, you're going to see the various surface properties that are available. So let's go ahead and adjust some of those right off the bat. Let's go ahead and make the shine. We'll take that to 75, and the reflection we're going to set at 50. Now immediately you're going to see that the default IBL is actually showing some specular highlights on the object. We're gonna change that IBL in just a little bit, but now that we've got the surface adjusted, let's go in and adjust the diffuse or base color of the object. Right now it's at default gray, but we're going to go into that diffuse property here at the top of the properties panel. Go in the menu here and choose Edit Texture. Here we're going to go ahead and give it a color fill. Here's where you can really play with pretty much any color you want. I thought it looked really good with this kind of burgundy color. So I'm going to go ahead and fill it with that. It's just a swatch. It's part of the default swatch collection here. You can see it's darker magenta red is what it is. So that just fill that entire document with that color. That's all you need to do. Close it and save the changes. Now the base color has changed. It does look light and washed out, and that is because of the IBL, of the default IBL that's on the object. So let's go ahead and create a new one of those. So go and select Environment again in your 3D panel. Then go to the Properties panel, and we're going to go to the IBL settings here and choose New Texture. I'm going to go ahead and replace the existing one. Go ahead and make this document 1000 by 1000 pixels with the background set to black, and then click OK. You can see it really darkens the object because a lot of the light in the scene was in fact coming from that default IBL. Now that we've made one that's solid black, there's a lot less light coming. In fact, the only light in the scene now is coming from this infinite light that is created also by default. We're going to change that in just a moment, but let's go and adjust our IBL by going back into that menu and choosing Edit Texture. Now inside here, we're going to leave the background black, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new document, or I'm sorry, a new layer in this document. And just like I do in the past, I'm just going to do a very simple elliptical selection, and we're going to do a gradient inside here, just a simple white gradient fade, just like that. Probably a little less brighter than that. Let's go and say, don't want to cover quite that much. I think that'll do right there. That's all I'm going to do. Go ahead and close that, save the changes, and now you can see that specular highlight on the object here. And here's where it starts to get a little bit more interesting in that we are going to keep that environment property selected. When you have the move tool selected, you can now actually move that IBL around and position the reflection exactly where you want it. So you can see I can get this really kind of shiny plastic, almost like a liquid look to it, depending on where I place that particular IBL reflection there. So that looks really good. I can adjust that positioning in a minute, but for now, I think that works pretty good. Go to that infinite light, that light that's created by default. Let's go ahead and change that to a different kind of light. Here in the Properties panel, you could go into the Type menu here, and we're going to change this to a point light. Now I'm going to go ahead and click the little button right down here. It says Move to View. It's going to put it right in the front view there. And I am going to go in that Properties, and let's adjust the intensity up to about 100%. And let's reposition it. I'm actually going to position this off to the side here. And notice as I move it back beyond the object, it's actually giving me some interesting lighting effects on the surface of my my extruded element here. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go in here into my extrusion once again. This is where we adjusted the shine and reflection. I'm going to actually brighten up the specular highlight on this by just making that a little bit of a lighter gray there, as you can see right there. So now I'm getting specular highlights, of course, from my IBL light, but also my point light. Notice if I move it down, I can get a little bit of an edge on that particular effect there. There we go. So now we've got the two light elements. We've got the IBL. It's giving us this really nice kind of plastic, liquidy look on those objects. And again, you can continue to play around with the positioning just by moving around the IBL just like this. Now I'm going to add a second point light to this scene. I've got this one illuminating the left side. Let's go ahead and add a second one. Go in here and choose New Point Light. It's going to go ahead and leave it at the intensity that it is at, and we'll position this one pretty much right here, right above that element there. Maybe push it further back in space. That's giving me some nice specular highlights on those objects there. Now for both of those lights, notice I got point light 1 and 2. Go into the Properties panel, and here you'll see the shadow softness setting. Let's actually dial that up to about 20 for both of those lights. Let's go ahead and do that to the other point light as well. There we go. So that's looking really good. Now, at any point you want to see what you're going to be getting as a result, you can go ahead and initiate a render and just get an idea of how it's going to look. So I'm just going to press Shift-Option-Command-R, and that's going to go ahead and start a render. Again, you don't have to sit through the entire render. Immediately, you're going to be able to tell if it's going to look the way you want it to, and actually that looks pretty good right there. So I'm going to go ahead and hit escape and cancel that render for the moment. And now let's go ahead and add the background elements to kind of finish off the overall scene here. So I'm going to go into my layers panel, select that background layer. I'm going to go ahead and reselect that same color I used for the 3D element. I'm going to go ahead and use my gradient tool, and I'm going to actually add a couple of gradients to the background here of that same color, just kind of random position like that. And so you can already tell how cool that's already looking. I mean, so you can, variety of ways you can use this, create background design elements, or even just interactive design elements. Whatever you need to do, you just play with these really interesting abstract extrusions like this. Now I'm going to take it a step further and add another element. I'm going to put up my libraries here. I've got this really cool kind of HUD graphic element here. I'm going to go ahead and pull this in from my libraries and scale it up. And I'm going to go ahead and rasterize it because I want to apply a couple of different other effects here. I'm going to go ahead and rasterize the layer. Change the blend mode of this to overlay, and let's drop the opacity to about 50%. And maybe even reposition it just a little bit so I can see more of the graphic element there, like that. That looks good. Turn off my rulers for the moment. There we go. Just like that. There we go. And then finally, let's go ahead and just throw some text in here. I'm just going to go ahead and do Master Effects. Fill that with white. And of course, let's go ahead and scale it down. So you can see that just a very simple shape can become a very interesting design element in just a few minutes. Now I'm actually going to grab that 3D element. I'm going to grab my current view again and just pull it a little bit closer to my view here, because here's where I'm going to take one more final step. It's going to add that much more of a hint of realism to it. And of course, I'm going to adjust my IBLs just a little bit more here. You see me play with IBLs, you'll see me that I'm adjusting them all the time, because I'm always trying to get them just in the right place where they're reflecting the light in just the right way. I think that's fine for now. Something like that maybe. But what I want to do is go back and select that current view. In those camera settings, remember we adjusted this down to 15mm lens? Right under that, you got depth of field. Now I'm going to go ahead and set the depth to 2, and we're going to create this very realistic depth of field on this object, as you can see right there. Now, if you go to this distance setting, also under depth of field, you can actually use the scrubby slider and adjust the focal point wherever you want it to be. Now notice I can bring it forward on the forward elements of that, or bring it back to the main element in the back, and now the foreground elements are out of focus. Now, of course, they look a little jagged, and that's because we're still in draft mode. So if I go ahead and initiate the render once again, we're going to see that depth of field effect take shape. It's going to start off very grainy. As I've mentioned before, depth of field, things that have a blurred effect tend to start out in the render very, very grainy and get much more refined as the render progresses. And you can see it's already starting to look pretty good there. I'm actually going to hit escape and cancel that render for the moment. I'm just going to make an adjustment on the position of these elements here just a little bit. Make that a little bit more in the foreground there. And I'm going to adjust my lights here. Let's get a little bit more illumination on this front element. Perhaps even increase the intensity a little bit more. Maybe even darken that background just a little bit. There we go. So then once again, let's go ahead and initiate the render. So there you can see. So you just by taking some very simple shapes, you can go ahead and create a very interesting abstract 3D element which you can then integrate into an overall design. In this case, we just use it as a simple kind of background and even foreground element. As you can see, it's coming to the extreme foreground. But don't forget that depth of field. That can really make the difference between with these objects, in that you can place them in there and it does have a 3D look to it, and you can adjust the lighting and the reflections and everything like that. But to really get that sense of depth and enhance that 3D feel, experiment with that depth of field setting on a variety of different design effects. So you can get some really interesting results there. Now, of course, this all looks really great and everything like that. And I did choose this particular color, and I think, and I like it a lot. However, let's say you did this as a project, and you just decide, hey, I want to do a different color. Let's maybe say we wanted to do a blue instead of a red look to it. No problem there. I'm actually going to go ahead and save this one as it is. Save it to the desktop. We'll call it Red Swirl Design. So let's say I wanted to go ahead and do it as a blue background element. So first I'm going to select the background layer itself. Go ahead and just do a hue saturation, and we'll do a kind of blue, bit of a light blue color here on the background. Reselect the 3D object. Just go to that extrusion material. Once again, go back into your properties panel. Remember where we went to the diffuse property to choose edit texture. That's where we did the color fill here. All you got to do now is just simply choose a blue color you want to use. I'm going to go ahead and get this one right here. Actually, let's get a little bit of a brighter blue. Let's adjust my swatch here. Let's make that like that. Now, you can also, of course, you don't have to overwrite the current color here. I did save the other document, but if you, in the event you wanted to do this in the same document, you can, in fact, create a new layer, fill it with the new color. You're retaining the old color just in case you want to keep it. Close that, save the changes. It's going to update with the new color. All the lighting elements are there. All you need to do now is just simply reinitiate the render, and then you've got the design all finished with a brand new color. So something to think about with abstract extrusions here inside Photoshop 3D. So, hope you enjoy this quick little project, something to certainly play around with and experiment with to try in a variety of different ways. See you guys next time right here on Master Effects Training. I'm Corey Barker. Take care.